I am your daughter, sir.
I'll give you my inheritance if you can prove that.
I am your daughter, sir. The words slice through the golden silence of the palace hall. The music dies. Guests freeze mid-gesture. Under the glow of chandeliers, the maid stands trembling, clutching a sealed envelope to her chest. Across the marble floor, Karim al-Saif turns slowly, disbelief curling into a smirk. His laugh breaks the silence, sharp, cruel, echoing off marble and glass. You? He points at her, eyes gleaming with arrogance. You claim to be my daughter? He takes a step closer, his voice rising for everyone to hear. I'll give you my inheritance if you can prove that. Laughter ripples through the crowd. Some whisper, some hide their smiles. Layla doesn't move. Her eyes glisten, but her jaw stays firm. The envelope in her hands trembles, the truth sealed within it heavier than gold. Karim turns away, still laughing, unaware that the next few seconds will haunt him forever. Before we begin this emotional story, tell us in the comments from which city you are watching, and don't forget to leave your like to keep following us. The revolving doors of Al-Saif Holdings spun endlessly, swallowing and releasing people who never looked down. Layla stood on the marble floor, small against the glass walls that shimmered like trapped sunlight, her reflection blurred between polished shoes and mirrored pillars. She wasn't supposed to be here. The guard at the reception desk had already told her twice, gently but firmly, that appointments were required. Still, she waited, holding a paper folder against her chest like a shield. Behind the glass, Karim's name glowed in golden letters. Karim al-Saif, Executive Chairman. She read it again and again, as if the letters might open a door through repetition. She had practiced what she would say for weeks, whispering into the dark of her tiny apartment. He deserves to know. He has to know. But now, surrounded by marble and money, her voice had vanished somewhere between her ribs. Miss, please, the guard said, softer this time. He doesn't see anyone without notice. Layla nodded, stepping back until the cool wall pressed against her spine. Through the tinted glass, she saw a convoy of cars pull up outside, black, silent, identical. Cameras flashed. Karim al-Saif emerged in a crisp white thobe, a smile rehearsed for headlines. He shook hands, posed, laughed. The kind of laughter that didn't need joy, only power. Layla's breath caught. For years that face had existed only in her mother's old photographs, half shadowed, half forbidden. And now he walked 10 feet from her, completely unaware. When he passed the lobby, her lips parted, but no sound came. By the time she found her voice, he was already gone, swept into the private elevator surrounded by aides in tailored suits. She left the building without speaking. The heat outside clung to her skin, heavy and dry. Buses groaned down the boulevard. The city gleamed with luxury she could only touch through glass. That night, her world shrank back to the small apartment above the bakery. The ceiling fan clicked with every turn. Flour dust floated through the open window like snow that never melted. On the table lay her mother's photograph, Nadia, young and radiant, laughing beside a man whose face was cropped out by time and pain. Layla traced the edge of the picture with her thumb. You said he was kind, she murmured to the photo. Maybe you wanted to believe that. The next morning she tried again, not at the tower this time, but at the charity office where Karim's foundation sponsored scholarships for children. She carried the same folder, same courage dressed as politeness. The receptionist smiled, took her name, promised a call that never came. By the end of the week, she learned how security worked. Who could enter where, who checked IDs, which companies cleaned the offices at night. She wasn't planning a trick, just searching for a way in. She had cleaned tables since she was 16. Invisible labor came naturally to her. Sometimes invisibility was the only power you had. In the evenings, she took the long way home through the old market, the smell of cardamom and grilled bread wrapped around her like a memory. She'd stop at a vendor who knew her mother once. They'd exchange polite smiles, both avoiding the subject of absence. Later, sitting by her window, she'd watch the lights from the corporate towers pulse against the sky. Somewhere in that skyline, he was eating dinner from silver plates, planning galas, shaking hands that moved the world. And she, a single mother's daughter, counted coins to pay rent. Yet beneath the quiet, Something was forming. Not anger, but determination. Each failed attempt hardened her calm. She would not storm his gates. She would find a way to stand before him and make him listen. As dawn broke over the desert horizon, Layla folded the photo, slid it back into the drawer, and tied her hair behind her neck. The day outside was just beginning, but the silence inside her felt ancient, the kind of silence that waits for a door to open. 2 weeks passed. The city baked beneath a pale, merciless sun, and Layla's resolve hardened like the asphalt beneath her shoes. Every morning she walked past Al Saif Holdings before her shift at the cleaning company, pretending it wasn't the reason her chest tightened each time. But one evening, as she clocked out, she overheard 2 supervisors arguing near the supply closet. They doubled the staff for the charity gala, one said, frustrated. Too many VIPs, too little time. The palace wants no mistakes, the other replied. Third-party contractors only. Background checks done by tomorrow. Layla froze, her hands still on the mop handle. The palace. The word glowed in her mind like a flame in the dark. She waited until they walked off, then slipped closer, scanning the discarded paperwork on the counter. A partial schedule listed venue, Al Saif Palace. Date, next Friday. Her pulse quickened. She folded the page into her pocket and tried to breathe evenly. That night, lying awake on her narrow bed, she could almost hear her mother's voice again, soft, certain. If he knew about you, he would care. Layla no longer believed it, but the words stayed anyway, like a lullaby she couldn't forget. The next morning, she called the agency. You said you needed more staff for the gala, she began, steadying her tone. I'm available. The woman on the other end sounded distracted. Night shift, heavy cleanup. You sure you can handle it? Yes, Layla answered before she even thought. I can handle it. 3 days later, she received a confirmation email with an access badge number and a single instruction. Arrive dressed and ready. Silence is professionalism. She spent her last savings on new black shoes and pressed her uniform until the seams were sharp. On the morning of the gala, the streets outside glittered with banners and gold lights. The papers were full of Karim Al Saif's face again, philanthropist, visionary, symbol of success. She cut one of the photos out and placed it beside Nadia's picture, 2 worlds printed on the same thin page. The ride to the palace felt unreal. The car window reflected the desert stretching endless and pale under the sky. When they arrived, the air smelled of jasmine and wealth. The gates opened soundlessly, and Layla's world changed color. Marble and gold, fountains that whispered in Arabic, guards with earpieces and perfect posture. Inside, everything gleamed. Chandeliers spilled light like water. The walls were carved with verses and vines, every detail screaming privilege. Layla kept her eyes low, her hands steady on the silver tray. Around her, other staff moved in silence, ghosts maintaining perfection. When she finally saw him again, her breath stumbled. Karim stood on the grand staircase, greeting diplomats and investors, his laughter rising above the music. He looked untouched by time, untouchable by truth. For a moment, she almost turned away. The distance between them felt insurmountable, not in meters, but in years, lies, and silence. But then she remembered the small photograph folded in her apron pocket, her mother's face. The letter she'd found hidden in the old box Mariam gave her. He promised, it said in handwriting that had faded but not died. He swore he would come back. Layla's throat tightened. The music around her swelled. Violins shimmered through the air. She took a breath so deep it hurt and whispered to herself, "Tonight, he will see me." She spent the next hour working through the ballroom unnoticed. Every glance, every footstep became part of a silent rehearsal for what she had come to do. The envelope she carried was light in her apron pocket, but it felt like destiny pressed between paper and ink. When the crowd gathered near the center for Karim's speech, Layla positioned herself at the edge of the light. His words were polished, practiced, about generosity, legacy, the importance of giving. The irony cut like glass. She waited for the applause, for the final toast, for the perfect moment to step forward and speak the words that had haunted her since childhood. The same words that would stop the music and steal the air from every guest in that golden hall. And when the last note of laughter faded, She knew it was time. The air inside the ballroom was warm with perfume and laughter. A string quartet floated above the hum of voices, and the chandeliers burned like small suns suspended in glass. Layla moved between the tables, blending into the rhythm of polished shoes and murmured conversations. Every step she took brought her closer to the stage, closer to him. Karim Al-Saif stood under the golden arches, his smile easy, his gestures sharp. Cameras followed him as if the air itself depended on his approval. "Tonight," he said, voice resonant, "we celebrate compassion, unity, and hope for those less fortunate." Applause rippled through the crowd. The irony settled like a stone in Layla's stomach. She placed a crystal glass on a nearby tray, her pulse pounding in her ears. Somewhere behind her, a waiter whispered for more napkins and someone laughed too loudly. But for Layla, the noise melted away until only her heartbeat remained, steady, defiant. She looked down at the envelope hidden beneath her apron. Its corners had softened from being held so long, but inside it was everything she'd gathered. The letter, the photograph, the small piece of truth that refused to die. Her fingers brushed the paper as Karim raised his glass again. "To legacy," he said. "To the future we build for our children." Something inside her broke. The words "our children" cut through the music, through the years of silence, through every closed door. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, eyes shining, voice trembling. "He will come back, my love," he promised. Layla set down the tray, her hands steady now. The crowd around her blurred into a sea of sequins and silk. Her feet moved on their own, carrying her forward until the light found her face. The violinist missed a note. A hush spread like a wave. Heads turned. Karim's speech faltered, his gaze narrowing in confusion. The maid in black and white stood before him, trembling but unafraid. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was so thick it seemed to hum. Layla lifted her chin, her voice barely above a whisper but sharp enough to pierce the golden air. "I am your daughter, sir." The words hung there, impossible and real. 1,000 thoughts collided in the room. Gasps, whispers, disbelief. Karim blinked once, twice, then his mouth curved into an amused smile. "You?" His voice echoed, tinged with mockery. "You claim to be my daughter." The guests looked at each other, unsure whether to laugh or look away. Karim took a step forward, his bisht gleaming under the lights. His confidence filled the room like thunder. "I'll give you my inheritance," he said, spreading his arms wide, "if you can prove that." Laughter erupted, forced, uneasy, cruel. Layla stood still. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't lower her gaze. The envelope in her hands trembled as if alive. For a moment, Karim seemed satisfied, another small humiliation to feed his pride. But as her silence deepened, his smirk wavered. Something about the steadiness in her eyes unsettled him, a reflection of someone he once knew. Layla turned slightly, facing the crowd, the reporters, the investors, the people who measured worth by applause. Her voice came again, quiet but heavy. "I have proof," she said, "and I didn't come here for your inheritance." The room froze. The orchestra stood motionless. Karim's smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of something new. Fear, or maybe recognition. The envelope slipped from her hand, landing softly on the marble floor. Every gaze followed it as it fell, white paper against gold. Layla took one step back, her breath steady, her eyes still on him. "Tonight, I just wanted you to see me," she said. And before anyone could move, she turned and walked away through the corridor of stunned faces, leaving her truth lying open beneath the chandeliers. For a moment, no one breathed. The laughter that had filled the ballroom seconds ago was gone, replaced by the deafening sound of silence. Every guest stood frozen, eyes darting between the billionaire and the young maid, who had just vanished into the corridor of gold and glass. Karim Al-Saif remained where she had left him, motionless, expression stiff. The echo of his own laughter still rang in his head, but it no longer sounded like victory. It sounded like something cracking. Cameras had caught everything. He saw flashes in the corners, phones raised discreetly by guests pretending to check their messages. His PR manager rushed toward him, whispering, "We'll handle it, sir, don't say another word." But Karim's pride moved faster than caution. "She's delusional," he barked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Someone find out who she is." Guards moved through the corridors, searching. By the time they reached the service exit, Layla was gone. Her uniform was folded neatly on a chair by the loading dock. The night air outside was cool, cutting. Somewhere beyond the palace gates, a single car engine faded into the dark. Inside, chaos bloomed quietly. Reporters whispered, guests pretended to laugh again, and the orchestra resumed with shaky hands. But no amount of music could drown the aftertaste of what they had witnessed. In his private office, Karim paced like a man trying to erase footsteps. "Get me her name," he ordered. "Every agency, every cleaner, every contract, I want her file before sunrise." His advisor hesitated. "Sir, the media already has footage." "What footage?" Karim snapped. "The incident, sir. Someone uploaded it before security confiscated phones. It's spreading fast." Karim froze. His reflection in the mirror stared back at him, the perfect image of composure cracked by disbelief. "Delete it," he said, but even he knew the words were useless. By morning, the video had circled the globe. The title was merciless. Millionaire CEO mocked Maid, claiming to be his daughter. Shocking confrontation at charity gala. News anchors debated the scandal. Analysts speculated about his private life, and social media turned the scene into a storm. Some laughed, others demanded answers. Karim stayed locked in his penthouse office, curtains drawn. For the first time in decades, he cancelled meetings. His phone buzzed with calls he didn't answer. Lawyers, board members, his publicist. But beneath the anger and fear, something else gnawed at him. An image he couldn't erase. The girl's eyes, the stillness in her silence, the way she hadn't begged, hadn't cried, only looked at him with something deeper than accusation. Recognition. He poured himself a drink, though it tasted like ash. For the first time, the weight of his own wealth felt heavy. Far from the palace, Layla sat alone at a bus stop outside the city. The wind tugged at her hair, the streetlights flickered. The envelope was gone now, left behind like a key turned in a lock. Her hands still shook, but her chest felt strangely light. She had done what she came to do. Still, as the bus approached, her reflection in the glass looked back at her, tired, tear-streaked, and suddenly unsure of what came next. She pressed her forehead to the window as the city lights faded behind her. Somewhere in that glittering skyline, the man who had laughed at her now faced the echo of his own words. And though the night swallowed her whole, Layla knew the silence was not the end. It was the beginning of something neither of them could control. By dawn, every news outlet carried the same story. Screens across Dubai, London, and New York glowed with Karim Al-Saif's image, frozen mid-laugh, his hand pointing toward a trembling maid beneath chandeliers. Headlines competed for attention. Billionaire CEO humiliates poor maid. Shocking truth or public stunt. Secret daughter scandal rocks Al-Saif empire. Karim's PR team flooded his phone with damage control strategies, release statements, donate money, deny the claim. But every suggestion sounded hollow. The company's stock slipped by noon. Investors wanted reassurance. His partners, once eager for meetings, sent polite cancellations. Inside his penthouse, Karim sat in front of the wall-mounted TV, watching himself replayed in slow motion. The sound of his own laughter, confident, cruel, echoing under crystal lights, turned his stomach. "Turn it off," he muttered, but the silence that followed was worse. He poured another coffee he didn't drink and stared at the skyline. Beneath the armor of his pride, something unfamiliar pressed against his ribs. Doubt. "Find her," he ordered his assistant. "Not to punish her. I just want to know who sent her." But the background check revealed nothing unusual. Her name, Layla Hassan. Her record, clean. Her mother, deceased. No address, no family listed, just a quiet life built on invisible work. That afternoon, Karim opened an old safe in his study, one he hadn't touched in years. Inside, beneath old ledgers and property deeds, he found a photograph he had almost forgotten. A young woman laughing by a seaside cafe, her dark hair lifted by the wind. Nadia. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. The edges of the photo were worn, but her eyes were unmistakable, soft, brave, alive. And in that instant, the memory came back, sharp and unwanted. The summer before his first fortune, the secret affair hidden from family, the promise he made and broke without looking back. He sat down heavily, the years folded inward. The laughter from the gala echoed again, this time as judgment. Down in the city's outskirts, Layla was trying to disappear. She had left the bus at the end of the line, walking until the streets grew narrow and quiet. She found a room above a tailor's shop, small, dusty, safe. The old woman downstairs gave her tea without asking questions. Layla scrolled through her phone only once. The video of the gala filled every feed. She saw herself, small, shaking, yet standing firm. The comments blurred together. She's lying. She's brave. He looked terrified. She turned it off. The screen went black, but the echo of the night lingered. For years she had imagined what it would feel like to tell him the truth. She hadn't imagined the emptiness afterward. Still, she couldn't ignore the calls she began receiving. Unknown numbers, journalists offering money. One message stood out. "You don't need to run. We should talk." Mariam. Her chest tightened. The older woman, her mother's former co-worker at the palace, the one who had given her the tin box. When they met later that evening in a quiet cafe, Mariam's hands trembled as she passed Layla a sealed envelope. "You were right," she whispered. "I found something he needs to see." Inside was a single photograph. Karim in a hospital corridor, years ago, holding an infant wrapped in a white blanket. His eyes were softer, almost uncertain. Layla traced the image with her fingertips. "Where did you get this?" Mariam sighed. "From your mother's things. She kept it all these years. She said one day you might need proof." Layla looked out the window. The city lights flickered like faraway fires. For the first time, the truth no longer felt like revenge. It felt like release. And somewhere high above that same city, Karim stared at his reflection in the window. The photo of Nadia still in his hand, wondering if the silence he'd built his empire upon was finally starting to speak. For days, Karim barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, standing beneath the chandeliers, eyes glistening, silent but unyielding. The same eyes Nadia once had when she'd told him, "Don't forget the promise." He tried to drown the thought in work, meetings, memos, transactions, a life built from marble and schedules. But the office had grown quieter. Assistants avoided his gaze, clients postponed calls. The empire he had built on control began to wobble under the weight of gossip. In his private suite, the television whispered headlines even when muted. Billionaire faces secret daughter allegations. Al Saif empire under scrutiny. His reflection on the glass window no longer looked like power. It looked like isolation dressed in silk. "Sir," said his advisor Omar, entering carefully, "we found her address. She works through a third-party cleaning agency. She resigned the morning after the gala." Karim didn't answer at first. He just turned toward the skyline, hands clasped behind his back. "Where is she now?" "Somewhere near Al-Barsha," Omar replied. "We can have someone bring her in." "No," Karim interrupted. "No more orders, no guards. I'll go myself." Omar hesitated. "Alone?" "Yes." The word came out quieter than intended, but final. That night, Karim left his palace without his driver. The streets beyond the gates felt unfamiliar, narrow, unpolished, alive. The scent of spices and traffic mixed in the air. He parked near a row of small shops and walked until he found the tailor's storefront Mariam had mentioned in her message. The old woman at the counter looked up, startled. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice trembling. "I'm looking for Layla," he replied, his tone stripped of its usual authority. "She's not home," the woman answered. "She went to see someone." He nodded once, unsure what to do next. "Tell her I came." She studied his face for a moment, the lines of fatigue, the hollow beneath his eyes. Then she said softly, "She already knows." Karim left without another word. The streets blurred around him. For the first time in years, he felt small, not because of loss, but because of truth pressing from every direction. Meanwhile, across the city, Layla sat with Mariam again, the photograph of the hospital still on the table between them. "He'll come looking for you," Mariam warned gently. "I know," Layla said, "but I'm not hiding anymore." Her voice didn't shake this time. She had spent too many years letting silence protect her pain. Now it felt like she was finally breathing her own air. The next morning, the headlines changed tone. Al-Saif seen visiting poor neighborhood alone. Paparazzi photos caught him outside the tailor's shop, looking lost, unguarded. Some called it humility, others a calculated move. But those who looked closely saw something different, a man stripped of pretense. In his office later that day, Karim sat at his desk, staring at the old photograph again. His eyes lingered on Nadia's smile, on the promise he had buried under ambition. "If she is mine," he murmured, "then I owe her the truth." He picked up the phone and dialed his attorney. "Find me the best DNA lab in the country," he said. Quietly, Omar raised an eyebrow. "Sir, are you sure?" Karim's gaze hardened. "I'm not sure of anything. That's why I need to know." As the call ended, he looked once more at the skyline outside, golden at sunset, as it had been the night of the gala. The difference was that now, for the first time, the city didn't bow to him. It simply waited. The laboratory was hidden inside a private clinic near the edge of the city, discreet, modern, wrapped in quiet. Karim arrived before sunrise, wearing a plain grey suit, no guards, no headlines. The receptionist recognized him instantly, but said nothing. She simply led him down a white corridor that smelled of antiseptic and sleep. The doctor, a man in his 50s with careful eyes, greeted him with the same formality used for royalty and confession. "We'll need a small sample, Mr. Al-Saif. It will take 48 hours. Karim nodded. His voice failed him. When the swab touched the inside of his cheek, it felt like the past itself was being collected. Years of silence, denial, arrogance condensed into a fragment of truth smaller than a breath. As he left, the morning sun climbed the skyline, painting his car in gold. He didn't notice. The city seemed to blur around him, its noise muffled by the weight of waiting. At the same time, across the city, Layla sat on the narrow balcony of her small room. The air smelled of dust and rosewater from the tailor's shop below. She had just turned down another interview request, deleting messages one after another. The world seemed to know her name now, but not her story. Mariam brought her breakfast, 2 small cups of tea and bread wrapped in cloth. "He's looking for you again?" she said softly. Layla stared at the skyline. "I know. He won't stop until he knows the truth." "Are you afraid?" Mariam asked. Layla shook her head slowly. "I'm afraid he'll know and it won't matter." The older woman reached out, covering her hand. "It will matter, child. Truth always finds its way home, even if people don't." Later that afternoon, Layla walked through the old market, the same place she used to wander as a child beside her mother. Vendors recognized her from the news, some with sympathy, others with curiosity. She ignored them, buying only a small pendant from an elderly jeweler, a simple silver moon. "It was your mother's favorite shape," the man said, smiling faintly. "She used to buy them every spring." Layla froze. "You knew her?" "Everyone here knew Nadia," he said. "She was light. She didn't belong to silence." Layla slipped the pendant into her pocket, her heart heavy with something she couldn't name. Meanwhile, in his mansion, Karim sat alone in his study. The phone on his desk remained silent, but his thoughts were loud. For decades he had measured time in profit and reputation. Now each minute without an answer felt like punishment. He found himself walking through the empty halls of his palace, marble shining, paintings unmoved. Everything he once admired now looked hollow. He paused before a framed photograph of his board of directors, his reflection layered over their smiles. Behind the glass he saw not triumph, but distance. That night he dreamed of the sea. Nadia was there, holding an infant wrapped in white. "She'll need you one day," she whispered, her voice echoing like wind through stone. "Don't let pride make her an orphan twice." He woke before dawn, sweating, the sound of waves still in his ears. When the phone finally rang that morning, his hands trembled before he answered. The doctor's voice was calm, professional, final. "Mr. Al-Saif," he said, "the results are ready." Karim's mouth went dry. And there was a pause, a silence that felt like the entire world holding its breath. "She is your daughter," the doctor said quietly. Karim closed his eyes. The glass of water in his hand slipped, shattering against the marble floor. The sound was sharp, But what he felt inside was worse. Not shock, not anger, only the crushing weight of everything he had refused to see. The drive to Al-Basha felt longer this time. Karim didn't bring a driver, an assistant, or a plan. Only an envelope in his jacket, the lab report folded beside Nadia's old photograph. The city outside his window pulsed with color and noise, but he barely saw it. For the first time, he was not the man the world waited for. He was a father chasing the shadow of a daughter he had refused to know. When he arrived at the tailor's shop, the bell over the door jingled softly. The old woman behind the counter lifted her head, eyes narrowing. "You again?" Karim nodded. "Please, just tell me where she is." The woman hesitated. "She's at the shelter by the coast, helping children. But don't go there to fix your image, Mr. Al-Saif. Go there to fix your heart." Her words stung more than any headline. Karim bowed his head slightly, a gesture foreign to him, and left without another word. The shelter sat at the edge of the city, where the towers thinned and the air smelled of salt. Children ran barefoot in the sand outside, their laughter bright against the distant hum of traffic. Layla stood near the doorway, handing out folded blankets. Her hair was tied back, her face calm, her uniform replaced by a simple white dress. When she turned and saw him, the world seemed to still again, but differently this time. No chandeliers, no audience, just two lives colliding in the open air. Karim stopped a few steps away, the envelope trembling in his hand. "Layla," he said, the name raw on his tongue. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to him. "You found out," she said quietly. He nodded. "I did." Silence filled the space between them, the kind that remembers everything words once destroyed. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said finally, "but I needed to see you." Layla's hands tightened around the edge of a blanket. "Why now?" "Because the world's watching. Because you're ashamed." He shook his head slowly. "Because I was wrong." The wind lifted her hair, carrying the faint sound of waves. Karim looked older in that light, smaller, stripped of everything gold. "I built an empire," he said, voice breaking, "but I couldn't build a family. I left your mother with promises I never meant to forget." Layla's eyes filled, but her tone stayed steady. "She waited for you, you know, until the end. Every night she said your name like a prayer that lost its answer." Karim's jaw tightened. "If I could trade everything I own for one more chance to keep that promise, I would." She looked at him for a long time, as if measuring truth against memory. Then she stepped closer, holding out her hand. "I don't want your empire," she said softly. "I just wanted you to see me." He reached for her hand, but she withdrew it gently, shaking her head. "Not yet." Karim nodded, not in defeat, but in understanding. "Then I'll wait," he said, "for as long as it takes." Layla turned back toward the children, her voice barely a whisper. "Waiting doesn't heal everything, but maybe it's a start." As he walked away, the sound of the waves grew louder, steady, endless, patient, the same rhythm that had carried her mother's voice through all those years of silence. And for the first time in decades, Karim felt something pure, humility. The scandal didn't vanish. It evolved. What had begun as humiliation turned into fascination. The same news outlets that once mocked him now followed every move of the repentant billionaire. Yet for Karim, there was nothing cinematic about redemption. It was slow, quiet, and often lonely. He began by selling the mansion where the laughter had first echoed. The press called it a strategy. In truth, he couldn't bear its emptiness anymore. The chandeliers felt like witnesses. The marble hallways whispered her words back to him. "I just wanted you to see me." He moved into a smaller house by the coast, the same neighborhood as the shelter. Every morning he drove there, unannounced, and spent hours repairing walls, carrying boxes, sweeping floors. The volunteers tried not to stare. Some recognized him from the headlines, but he worked in silence, sleeves rolled, head bowed. Layla watched from a distance at first. She didn't speak to him. She didn't stop him either. Sometimes their eyes met briefly. No anger, no forgiveness, just quiet understanding that healing has its own rhythm. One afternoon, a storm rolled in from the sea. Rain hammered against the tin roof of the shelter, leaking through cracks Karim hadn't yet fixed. He climbed a ladder, hands shaking, tools slipping in the wind. Layla ran out, shouting, "You'll fall!" He looked down, soaked and smiling faintly. "It's all right," he said. "I'm used to high places." The ladder trembled. She grabbed the bottom to steady it, glaring up at him. "Not all heights are safe, Kareem." Her use of his name, not sir, not father, made something in him loosen. He climbed down slowly, water dripping from his sleeves. They stood close under the storm's rhythm, breathing the same wet air. "You don't have to prove anything," Layla said softly. He shook his head. "Maybe not to you, but I have to prove something to myself." For the first time, she didn't walk away. They finished the repairs together wordlessly until the rain softened into mist. In the following weeks, he began transferring ownership of several charity foundations into Layla's name. "For transparency," he told the board, though in his heart it was an apology written in contracts and signatures. When reporters asked why, he answered simply, "Because she knows what real need looks like." The public shifted again, from outrage to empathy. Some called it redemption, others saw manipulation. Kareem didn't care. For once, he wasn't living to be believed. One evening, as the sun bled into the sea, Layla approached him outside the shelter. He was sitting on the steps, hands dusted with paint, watching the horizon. "You've changed," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "No, I just stopped pretending not to care." She sat beside him. The silence between them was different now, no longer heavy, but gentle, full of things they didn't need to say. After a long moment, she whispered, "My mother would have liked to see this." Kareem looked toward the waves, eyes glistening. "She sees it," he said. "Maybe not the way we wish, but she does." Layla nodded, the faintest smile touching her lips. For the first time, the air between them didn't carry judgment, only peace. Weeks passed quietly along the coast. The city had already moved on to new scandals, new names. But inside the shelter, something lasting was being rebuilt, not of marble or gold, but of trust. Kareem kept working there, not as a benefactor, but as a man learning the language of humility. Layla began to notice small things, how he listened when people spoke, how he no longer checked his watch, how his laughter, rare, subdued, carried warmth instead of arrogance. One morning, she found him in the courtyard, helping a child fix a broken kite. The boy laughed as the paper wings lifted into the wind. Kareem looked up, following it, and in that fleeting moment, Layla saw something she hadn't seen before. Not the man who mocked her, not the billionaire who built an empire, but simply a father. When the kite finally fell, he turned and met her gaze. No words, no excuses, just an unspoken question in his eyes. She walked closer, her voice steady. "You kept your promise this time." He frowned slightly. "What promise?" Layla smiled faintly. "The one you made to her. To my mother. You came back." The silence between them stretched, fragile and sacred. Kareem swallowed hard, his voice rough. "I failed both of you for so long, Layla. I don't know how to begin to make that right." She looked at him, her eyes soft but strong. "You already did. You came without cameras. You stayed when no one cared. That's enough." He nodded, emotion breaking through the composure that had once been his armor. "You have her strength," he whispered. "And her eyes." Tears welled in hers, but she didn't look away. "And your stubbornness," she said, smiling through them. They both laughed quietly, the kind of laughter that heals instead of hides. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The sea breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine. Children's voices echoed somewhere behind them, distant and alive. Then Layla took a slow step forward, closing the space between them. Her hand rose, hesitant but sure, resting lightly on his arm. "Father," she said softly. The word broke him open. Kareem's eyes closed, and for the first time tears escaped freely down his face. He covered her hand with his own, holding it as if afraid it might vanish. They stood like that, not as a billionaire and a maid, not as strangers divided by pride, but as two souls finally meeting in truth. When they turned toward the sea, the sun was setting in a blaze of gold, spilling light across the water. Layla whispered, "She would have loved this view." Kareem nodded, his voice barely a breath. "Then let's love it for her." And in that quiet moment, The world that once mocked them fell away, leaving only the sound of waves and the fragile peace of forgiveness. Months later, the palace lights no longer burned through the night. The empire continued to thrive under new leadership, quieter, humbler, guided by a name once erased from its history, Layla al-Saif. Karim never returned to the stage or the spotlight. He chose silence instead, the kind that heals instead of hides. Every morning he walked to the shore near the shelter, carrying 2 cups of tea. One he placed on the empty bench beside him for Nadia. The other he drank slowly, watching the horizon as the waves erased yesterday's footprints. Layla often joined him there, no longer as the maid who trembled under chandeliers, but as a woman who had found her own strength. Together they spoke little, but everything between them was understood. The past no longer chained them, it taught them. Forgiveness hadn't erased what happened, it transformed it. Pride had built walls, but truth had broken them. In the end, they discovered that dignity wasn't about wealth or reputation. It was about choosing compassion when the world expected bitterness. And though Nadia was gone, her voice lived between their silences, a quiet reminder that love buried by pride can still bloom when watered by courage. As the camera of life pulled away and the father, the daughter, the sea, one truth remained clear: even the most powerful fall, but those who rise with humility stand higher than any empire ever could. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this heart-touching story. Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most. Subscribe and turn on the bell to receive more stories that inspire and transform. Leave a like if you believe in the invisible strength of dignity and family. And above all, thank you for being part of this community that believes in stories with soul. And before you go, watch the story I leave here on the left. I'm sure it will also move you and make you reflect.